It's 33 minutes after 11. We may have a woke watch on the way this hour, or probably this hour as opposed to the next hour. So stand by for that. It's quite a good one, actually. I'm having to read the article twice, and this one's come in via the woke watch email address, which, like all the wizard wheezes and top ideas I have on this program, I get very excited about for about 2 days and then completely forget. So on this occasion, I'm delighted. It seems to have lasted a month at least, although we've taken our foot off the gas. I think we might be winning. I think that because the newspapers are worried about featuring on Woke Watch now, so they've started slightly perhaps turning down the dial on the ludicrous, dishonest, utterly ridiculous scaremongering that usually accompanied any story containing the word woke. But the one I've got for you today, I'm having to actually read twice because although it says slammed for wokeness, I can't actually find anything in the article that involves the organisation that I'll tell you about later in Woke Watch being slammed. I'll double check. Anyway, back to the question in hand, which is about the collapse in our working population, which is doubly scary. I mean, it's scary enough on the one hand, but when you consider that the man in charge at the moment is trying to turn the employment situation into a win, he's added it to his list of bogus victories, it becomes doubly scary. We seem to be sleepwalking into an even bigger crisis than the one we currently have. And everyone is responsible for it because people are knocking work on their head after having a recalibration of their priorities during lockdown, or sadly they're unable to work because of long-term sickness, including increasingly long COVID, or they're not coming here to work because post-Brexit, people who would have come in frictionlessly to work here are required to get visas, which they don't have to get in 27 other countries. So, frankly, why would they bother? Helen is in Blackheath. Where do you fit into that equation, Helen?
Okay, I've been a GP receptionist for 15 years. Okay. I have worked at 2 practices, and I've been to university in between and did a degree that kind of focused on mental illness and society at Goldsmiths University. I am currently paid the same as I was paid 15 years ago. When I worked in a Greenwich GP practice, I earned £10 an hour.
Gosh. 15
years later, I earn £10.60 an hour, I think, but the paid lunch has gone.
Good
no
grief.
more paid lunch. And I had 1 day illness this year. And when I got COVID last month, because I'd had 1 day in, I think, August or September last year, they deducted money from my pay packet. And I've resigned this week because
have you just had enough?
I cannot take being this angry anymore.
Oh, Helen, I'm sorry.
I love my job.
I know, I can tell.
Yeah, I love being a GP and I love being out at work 2 days a week. It just kind of keeps me in touch with what's going on in the world.
But not anymore.
I feel.
So
but
what you've described to me is and this might go back to our caller talking about neoliberalism at the end of the 10 o'clock hour. You're describing a kind of form of economic management that is so dedicated to maximising profit that all workers...
Absolutely.
You agree, get squeezed so much.
Kids, I called my kids and said, I think it's just aggressive capitalism gone mad.
Yeah.
I work with people who earn the money I've described. They are buying their own equipment because two of them have hip complaints.
Oh.
They're in their 50s and they have bought second-hand standing desks to use at work. They've had the jabs in the hip. They've had everything done, but they're still in pain. And I know that the 2 partners at the business who are under 40 years of age have just received a £100,000 quaff payment, which is for fulfilling all the obligations, numbers counts, where you get everybody in who needs a blood pressure check, everybody who needs this, that and the other. You are given money.
Yes.
Now, none of us see that. It just goes to the partners.
So that's greed. It's about poor management as well. There's no reason why that shouldn't trickle down a little bit, so to speak.
Because we're the ones doing the work. And we triage patients now. So the job has changed hugely since 15 years ago when I went into it.
I was going to do one of the other contenders for the topics under discussion today, Helen, what was in fact what's going on in our GP surgeries. But I decided not to do it today because I always worry slightly that people who are already very worried about health concerns will get even more worried if we have conversations. But here you are doing it anyway and tying in perfectly to the conversation we are actually supposed to be having. Because what you've led me to is the conclusion, and I suspect our previous two callers fit into this category as well, although very different sectors. One a train driver, one I think he was in IT, was he? A businessman in IT. But the people who can walk away will walk away increasingly as what you've described as aggressive capitalism gets an ever tighter grip upon our nether regions.
Yep. My kids have been urging me to do it for a while. They think that I'm being abused. I mean,
exploited.
And I just cannot continue to feel so angry going in there.
And if you don't need to.
It's totally unprofessional now. The staff that they've got, the person who's managing the reception team has no experience, no training, asked me questions about my sickness when I had COVID because I said I need to go home. She asked me if I was a nervous sort of person.
That's just unbelievable, isn't it? No.
And would have to clear it with the partner before I was allowed to go home. I'm 65 years of age.
I'm just trying
my record on health is brilliant.
I'm trying to imagine the sort of environment that might have inculcated these sort of attitudes, and I'm wondering whether these words here that I've mentioned a few times on the programme might have somehow inspired the attitude of the people you're talking about. The British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work among the lowest hours. We retire early and our productivity is poor. Whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors or businessmen, the British are more interested in football and pop music. Now, what do you think that does to a workplace, if not create
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
No, exactly. And there's quite a few people who can't afford to walk away.
Well,
my husband can support me.
Yes.
If I just come to that.
No, that's the point. That's the point I'm meaning. That you get squeezed so hard, and I know nothing of this world because my job is not in this category. Thankfully, I'm just through luck. Certainly not judgment. You get squeezed so hard that by circumstances, some of which are imposed just from within your company. In your case, with these greedy partners who are trousering six-figure sums while expecting you to give up your paid lunch hour, and in some cases from above, from even higher. And that line I read you from a book called Britannia Unchained: Global Lessons for Growth and Prosperity was written by Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Elizabeth Truss, and I wonder whatever happened to them. Chris is in Harrogate. Chris, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James.
Hello,
in response to your question this morning, I'm in this category now of people you're exactly talking about. 52 years of age. I've worked ever since before I should have left school, so I left school at 15. I've worked nearly every day of my life up to this point. We got to a point where we just thought, I'm slogging my guts here for absolutely nothing. I'm slogging my guts. I'm working 80 to 90 hours a week, and I'm earning good money. Don't get me wrong, I was earning good money, but my quality of life was very poor. I was at home for a few hours a week. I was spending money on things I didn't really need to be spending it on, and I never saw anybody. I never had a life. So I've taken a massive pay cut. I'm now doing 2 days a week in an industry which is in such dire straits.
What are you doing? Can I ask? Do you mind?
Yeah. I've been involved in wagons all my life, in driving wagons, in teaching people to drive them, in examining people for the civil service how to drive them.
Right.
Back to being a driver.
Okay.
And I'm doing 2 days a week at present, and it gives me enough money to pay the bills. I've got nothing being stored away, but in order to do that, my house has now been sold, hugely downsizing, moving into a static home on a park where I can buy it outright, no more mortgage, bills halved, quality of life improved drastically. It's a no-brainer.
Well, it is when you describe it like that. It wouldn't be for everybody. It suits you. It's gonna depend on dependence and responsibilities a bit. Some people won't have these choices, but it's so bizarre that we've got 4 people now, or 5 people from completely different walks of life, all essentially describing the same thing, which is I'm just not. If I don't have to put up with this anymore, then I'm not going to. And then you do the calculations and you do it. And I should add my friend to the list who loves his job but has just decided that he quite fancies spinning the wheels, and he can at the age of 56. I had no idea this was going on, but it obviously is huge because it's a significant enough phenomenon to concern one of the best and most insightful writers on the Financial Times. I bet you didn't realise you were part of that phenomenon, Chris, when you took your decision, isn't it? It's remarkable. And to people who say, well, actually, no, more interesting than that. What are you going to do now? I mean, are you going to carry on like this, doing 2 days a week, or are you going to? What have you got plans? Because you're only 53.
I'm 52. Actually.
52. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm currently doing my degree with the Open University.
Oh, wow.
I made the decision when this lockdown thing started, right, what am I going to do? Am I going to do this for the rest of my life? No, I'm not. I'm going to do something. I'm going to read something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I've started that. I'm enjoying that.
What are you doing?
Want to finish that. I'm reading classics.
Oh, wow. That is quite a turnaround, isn't it?
It's a massive turnaround, and one of the things that I have this conversation regularly with people, and it brings us right into the heart of government, where we've got a man who claims his legend, his hero, his man was Pericles, who brought about democracy, and here we have a man who's dismantling it. It's ironic, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and of course they're not big fans of people getting degrees either, as we discover from some of the policies that have crept in. And wow, well, I mean. There's a little bit of me that's thinking, well, I mean, I love my job, but I wouldn't mind having a complete recap. I've got to get the kids out of school first. I've got to get them through university before I can start thinking about stuff like that. But it is as if the combination of events over the last few years has just given people a view from a window that they didn't know existed before. Is that a good way of putting it?
It is, and the thing is, I'm not alone in this. I mean, I live in a small village, and there's several people here now. The guy who lives opposite me, and he's been a nurse for, I think, over 25 years. He's just quit. He's had enough. He said, I can't cope with it anymore. It's too much.
And if you can walk away, you will walk away. That's applied to every single caller we've had this hour, and it's 11:45. Chris, thank you for that, mate. Good luck with your studies. I mean, already dropping in your classical references very, very casually. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of or a huge believer in the fact that understanding history helps you understand the present. It is 11:49 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I think it's probably time for one of these.
Woke Watch.
The Globe Theatre under fire for providing woke trigger warnings for Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Bad news. Get it? Yeah, bad news for Shakespeare lovers. London's Globe Theatre is slammed over its woke audience trigger warnings for playwright's classic Julius Caesar, including cautions over the use of stage blood and knives. Okay, so what do you do first if you are a student of Woke Watch? You start looking for the offence. What is the offence? Okay, so there's content guidance mentioned, I think, in the programme, or possibly in some displays put up in the foyer, which simply says depictions of war, self-harm and suicide, stage blood and weapons, including knives. That's it. That's literally it. Content guidance, depictions of war, self-harm and suicide, stage blood and weapons, including knives. But the Globe, which is on the site of the Bard's original playhouse, alerts the audience before performances, maybe there's a little announcement, that the show will contain stage blood and weapons, including knives. They alert the audience before performances, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of civilization as we know it. What's the second thing you do if you're a student of Woke Watch? You found what the offence is. They alert the audience before performances that the show will contain stage blood and weapons, including knives. Who are the actual frightened people here in these stories? The people that might be traumatised by particular types of violence or by depictions of blood on stage, or the people who are frightened of alerting the audience before performances? I don't know. But now you look for the slam. That's what I say. You found the offence, now you look for the outrage. This is the only outrage I can find in the Daily Mail's write-up of a Sun story, okay? I can't find anyone who slammed the Julius Caesar thing. But this is how the story continues. It comes less than a year after the Globe's bosses came under fire for giving audience members trigger warnings about upsetting themes in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, even providing a number for the Samaritans for after the show. You know, whenever somebody mentions suicide on this programme, I always give you the number for the Samaritans in case you're affected by similar issues. Yeah, well, that's the same. Unbelievable. So still no slamming. So that's what they've done. But this is the slamming of Julius Caesar. They've recycled comments by Anne Widdecombe and Christopher Biggins from a year-old story about Romeo and Juliet. So Anne Widdecombe said, "You don't go see Romeo and Juliet if you want a light-hearted evening." And Christopher Biggins added, "Do we have to have signs for everything under the sun? It's a joke. What are they trying to do? What they are trying to do is insulting the mentality of theatregoers." So Woke Watch on Julius Caesar being slammed contains 2 quotes from 2 people about a completely different story from a year ago involving a completely different play, which is just as stupid as the one about Julius Caesar, and that is the latest.
Woke Watch.
11:52 is the time. Back to, that was a good one, wasn't it? That was a really good, I mean, good God, who writes this rubbish? They've been slammed, but they alert the audience to the presence of... I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you are screaming at other people for being thin-skinned, maybe don't get completely freaked out by a little announcement before a play starts. They'll be getting cross. It's like it is the original Angry Biggins in that story, isn't it? It's an Angry Biggins commenting on the apparent wokeness of a little announcement before a play starts. God save us all from an Angry Biggins. Back to the question of the holes in the workforce. This has been fascinating, hasn't it? Craig's in Brent Cross. Craig, what can you tell us?
Hello, James. Just a quick potted history. I was in the army for 22 years, left in 2007, went into health and safety, became a health and safety consultant, affected by IR35, realised how much I'm giving away. It's a nice position to be in, don't get me wrong.
Sure, of course.
My wife's German. We bought a static caravan in Spain 3 weeks ago.
Oh, lovely.
I'm going to move away a little bit.
Out of the country? I mean, is that going to... You can do that as a spouse, can you? Because I know it's got a lot harder as a consequence.
Can
of
do
Brexit.
it as a spouse, yes.
Good.
There's a EU regulation.
Good.
I did do Greek residence before Brexit, so I'm a Greek resident.
Oh, fantastic. So you've got... I don't know what's happened to your phone line, Craig. What have you done?
Is that better?
What did you do?
Nothing.
Oh, rubbish. You were doing something. You're making your sandwich or something while you're talking to me. You put me down, aren't you?
Sat in a hotel room.
All right. So you've got... What forced the issue? What made you think I'm just going to rewrite the rules of my engagement with the economy now?
When COVID started, my client dropped me.
Right.
And we realised we could live for less.
Yes.
Last year we took 8 months off. We spent 4 months in Greece. Yeah, okay, it all sounds really good. I'm not ready to fully retire. I mean, I'll still take a contract 3-4 months, but I want to enjoy life. We both want to enjoy life. We want to enjoy life.
And you worked out that you can.
UK.
You worked out that you can.
Well, yeah.
It's pretty simple.
We've got 3 houses, so we're selling one at the moment.
That helps.
I've done quite well since leaving the army.
Sure.
Lucky,
no one's going to begrudge you that, are they? And so, I mean, if circumstances created the idea, it's not something that you would have arrived at if everything had been tootling along as normal. But as we've said, it's as if you've got this window, you've got this view from a window you didn't know existed, and you like the look of it, and you thought, I'll have a bit of that. I love it. I really do. I mean, the problem is that, I'm thinking of the generational issues here. Men in particular in their 50s are just about going to have had, as you said, some sort of pension arrangements and other issues that allow them to make these decisions. I worry, as I often do, for the younger generation. And, of course, it's not your problem, and nor should it be, that this is going to cause problems at an economic level, not least because Brexit's exacerbated almost all of it, and they still won't even say the word out loud. I love this conversation, and it could carry on forever, not just with Craig, but with everybody who's contributing today. And we haven't even done the bit about the problems that it's created for employers. We might get onto that next week. We probably should get onto that next week because... And we haven't touched on immigration either. So I did that magnificent introduction, pulling together all of these different stories. All I needed to do was, here's a story in the FT about people knocking it on the head because they can. Are you one of them? All that wasted effort putting into knitting it together like a beautiful scarf of chat. Gary's in Tooting. Gary, what would you like to say?
Well, I also knocked it on the head, as you say. I did it at the first opportunity I could. At the age of 55, on my 55th birthday, I took the pension, and I now work weekends in a supermarket the way I used to when I was 16. And I'm loving it. But I think there's an important element to the lives of those of us who've exercised our not inconsiderable privilege. Because
yes, I'm glad you pick up on that. I've glossed over it a bit.
Yeah, it's you'll feel it soon with your kids, but it's my kids' generation who are paying for this, and they won't have the opportunity when they're 55. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And that's the way the traffic is going without us realising it. Deregulation, less support in the workplace, huge fury from the client media whenever a workforce seeks to exert a little bit of pressure on an employer. It's incredible, isn't it?
I just wish they voted. I really wish they voted, because the world wouldn't look like this if they did. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I think one needs a creative outlet. You need to fill the time, although that's probably not quite the right expression. You need to do something creative, and for some people that might be an allotment. For other people it's going to be voluntary work in the community. For me, I write about theatre and cricket and stuff like this, but you need something that's been pent up for a while that you can then go and explore. And the more you explore, the more you find. And the world just opens up. And you don't need as much money as you think you do, because if you're not, working 9 to 5, 5 days a week is a pretty expensive way to spend time, I can tell you that, because once you stop, all of a sudden these sort of mid-afternoon offers kick in, the lower cost of transport and things like this. Yes. You do need money, but you don't need as much as you think you need. You don't.
And you've stressed this is a generational issue, and that is. And what was it at 55 that made? Was it lockdown? Did that contribute to the?
No.
What was it?
No. It was the rules. It was the rules. You can get your hands on a pension at 55.
So you were desperate to. You were just desperate to do this. You.
I wasn't desperate, but I was in a position, and our generation, because you're not that much younger than me, our generation have the choices that the younger generation don't have.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart, really.
Well, you mentioned that, and I'll end this hour. Thank you, Gary, and good luck with it. I mean, with a text from someone in the younger generation, James's topic on people aged 50 plus, just jacking it in, is a massive issue, especially when you view it through the perspective of the generation below. I'm 38, and I only know 7 people from my class of 30 who own their own homes. It's an entire generation who should have been homeowners 10 years ago have already given up on that dream and therefore have less invested in future planning. The Thatcher-inspired society is reaching its end, and 2 generations will suffer before we reach the Scandi model of social democracy. Let ideologies of the past die and give everyone a universal basic income to reduce the class hatred and let people crack on with life. Listen, we've done it before and we'll do it again, I hope, but I think we've just stumbled into another massive issue of our time before most other people. 3 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to a story that you will be aware of and that I wish we didn't have to talk about, but we've talked about it before and we will almost certainly talk about it again. And that is going to form the basis of the question that I ask you in a moment. We're talking about the latest attack upon a school in America, this one leaving 19 school children and 2 teachers dead. Also today, I can tell you that the husband of one of the teachers has died of a heart attack. I'm going to play you a little clip of a basketball coach called Steve Kerr, who coaches the Golden State Warriors, who play out of San Francisco. And I'm going to ask you why this keeps happening, and you're going to draw upon your knowledge of America, your time in America. You might be in America now, and I know some of the answers. I really do. But I don't think you should ever stop asking the question. And if I live to be 105, I don't think I will ever distill the argument and the emotion as completely as this chap who I'd never heard of before. I don't follow basketball. Steve Kerr did it at a normal press conference the other day, where events in events in Uvalde prompted him to talk about that instead. I can also tell you that the National Rifle Association has defied calls to cancel its annual convention, which is described as 14 acres of guns and gears and is set to unfold less than 300 miles away, which might not sound much to a Brit, but in the context of America, that's practically next door. But just have it, if you haven't heard this before, I'll warn you now. I wonder if this counts as a trigger warning. We might be in the Daily Mail tomorrow. It's pretty harrowing stuff. It's pretty emotional. So be prepared.
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot-around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California, and now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check? 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
And at that point, he stormed out of the press conference. And I don't know why it's so powerful. A lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people have probably expressed the same thoughts and the same feelings. But sometimes the planets just align. And there was a rawness. I'm a great believer that the pictures are better on the radio. But on this occasion, I'd urge you to find the footage as well. There's a rawness to that is utterly compelling. It's hypnotic. It's humanity in its purest form. That just the incomprehensible fury at the men and women who continue to facilitate these sort of crimes. The 50-50 tie in the Senate is unbelievable. You need 60 votes for legislation to pass, but most Republicans are intractable in their opposition to almost any expansion of gun control. Politicians that will be turning up at the 14 Acres of Guns and Gear Festival. It's just 300 miles away from the primary school where the latest massacre occurred. A fairly predictable collection. You have Greg Abbott, who's the governor of Texas, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a former presidential candidate, of course. But you'll remember that they have both been involved recently in passing legislation that made it easier to get guns. I think lowered the age requirement and receive campaign donations from gun lobbyists as well. Abbott and Cruz respectively. So Abbot passed laws that reduced the age limits on buying guns, and Cruz receives campaign donations from gun lobbyists. I have done this a lot of times. Steve Kerr is the son of Professor Malcolm Kerr, who was himself assassinated in Beirut when serving as president of the American University. So he is someone who knows more about gun violence than anyone ever should. That's perhaps part of the reason why the passion is so acute. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I've grown up in this country. I know America. I know Americans. I just can't get my head past that word intractable. That's the word we're going to focus on. Why does this keep happening? 03456060973. And why are politicians like the one you're about to hear so blasé about their complicity in mass murder? This is Ted Cruz being buttonholed by the rather excellent Mark Stone of the British, and that becomes relevant, Sky News.
There are 19 sets of parents who are never going to get to kiss their child goodnight again.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
The proposals from Democrats in the media, inevitably, when some violent psychopath murders people.
A violent psychopath who's able to get a weapon so easily. 18-year-old with 2 AR-15s.
If you want to stop violent crime, the proposals the Democrats have, none of them would have stopped this.
But why does this only happen in your country? I really think that's what many people around the world they cannot fathom. Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism so awful?
You know, I'm sorry you think American exceptionalism is awful.
I think this aspect of it.
You get your political agenda.
No, it's honestly,
God love you.
Senator, it's not. I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
Well, it is just an American problem, sir.
Mr. Cruz, why is America the only country that faces this kind of mass shooting?
But you can't answer that. You can't answer that, can you, sir? You can't answer that. Why is this country?
Why is it that people come from all over the world to America? Because it's the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth.
It may be the freest. It may be the most.
Why are our kids dying in school?
Amazing work there. I don't know who the female journalist was, but Mark Stone of Sky News going in there. And it is just baffling, isn't it? And it's that word intractable. That the absolutely passionate opposition to the suggestion that it should be made in any way harder to get hold of weapons of war. You know, these are not the kind of guns that you go shooting tin cans in your backyard with. These are automatic, semi-automatic weapons. It's absolutely incredible. The gulf between America and the United Kingdom is never bigger, or America and the rest of the world is never bigger than when we do this. And I just want to get a little bit of an insight into it all, or a better insight, or a bigger insight. It's then you add on the fact that the National Rifle Association are cracking on with their 14 acres of guns and gear. Oh, and guess who else is going to address that convention? Donald Trump, of course. And it goes hand in hand with far-right politics. Obviously, Donald Trump is a far-right politician. That's not an opinion, that's just counting. But why? So bizarre. Going to open up the phone lines now. There are 2 questions. Why does it keep happening? Which I guess the answer is fairly straightforward to, because guns are so easy to get hold of. And secondly then, why is opposition to any form of gun control so intractable? I really want you to focus on those words, any form of gun control, any enhancements, just making it, they're not abolishing things, they're not doing what we did after the Dunblane attack, although, needless to say, Boris Johnson had some fairly obnoxious things to say about that after the only school massacre, I think, in this country. Prompted a ban on handguns. They're not talking about bans, they're just talking about making it harder to get hold of stuff. And 50 Republican senators won't even contemplate the concept. Why? 0345 6060973. And if Steve Kerr's right and 90% of Americans are in favour of it, I think that why gets even bigger, doesn't it? Well, I mean, what? How do you make sense of it? If you've spent a lot of time there, if you are American, if you have American family who you argue with about this, what do they say? Do they have powerful arguments? Not for the right to bear arms, but the right to bear any arms at all with enormous and untrammelled ease. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And a lot of you point out there's some lines I'm familiar with that you can buy a gun at 18 or even younger, I think. You can't buy alcohol until you're 21. It's quite incredible. And if you want to hear the stupidest comment in response to this from the kind of political rump that we're examining here, it's probably the fellow who said that, well, we didn't ban planes after September the 11th. I often feel this way about conservative backbenchers, but on this occasion it's all conservative frontbenchers, actually, given the current climate. But I look at I can't imagine what would happen when you feel and hear those words coming out of your own mouth. How can your ears not hit the alarm bell? Well, we didn't ban planes after September the 11th. It's 12:15. 12:18 is the time, and as the National Rifle Association defies demand to cancel gun convention after the latest school massacre, I, as an ingenue Brit, am wondering where the political adamance, is that a word? Where the political intractability comes from. What explains it? Because to anybody on the outside looking in, it's so obvious that it should be harder to buy guns in America than it currently is. Oh, there is one moment where firearms will be banned from the conference floor, and that's for the duration of Donald Trump's speech, his fifth address to the event. The relationship between far-right politics, gun control and abortion is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? It's grimly fascinating. What are you? Oh, I'm pro-life. How do you feel about refugees? Screw them. How do you feel about poor people? Screw them. How do you feel about school massacres? Yeah, guns. We need more guns. What are you again? Pro-life. Pardon? What life are you pro? Lives that haven't started yet. But the lives that have started, screw them all. There it is. I mean, Republican stroke Christian in that context. Ideology in a nutshell. And Donald Trump, kind of like their poster boy. Let's go to Alan, who's in Buffalo. Alan, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, you're absolutely on point. This is a uniquely American problem, and there are so many root causes of it. It's not just misinterpretations of what the Second Amendment is supposed to be. Sure. It also has to do with, gerrymandering congressional districts. It has to do with the fact that Ted Cruz can say idiotic things and not have to worry about whether he's going to have a job next year.
Right.
It's things like the culture in America. I mean, you're talking about Texas. That's almost the epicenter of gun culture in America, if you really think about it. So we have to change the culture. We have to change the way that we district congressional districts. We have to talk about how we reconfigure the way we talk about the Second Amendment. And, it comes down to federalism. I mean, I live in New York, and New York has some pretty robust gun laws.
Right.
But next door in Ohio, next door in Pennsylvania, they're quite lax. So the kid who just shot up a supermarket in my town,
yes,
he bought guns legally at the age of 18, which is completely insane. And he was able to modify them because he went into Pennsylvania to pick up some parts and ammo and things like that. And it's just, I don't understand how Ted Cruz can be asked these questions by, thankfully, a British reporter, because certainly ours don't ask these types of questions. And, you saw him get hot at the end of that because he's not used to that kind of questioning. And it's a fundamental truth that we have too many guns, and that's what is fueling these mass shootings. And
the ease with which you get hold of them. Let me phrase the question this way then, Alan. And you refer, I should have mentioned when I introduced you, you refer to the massacre last week, May the 14th in Buffalo at the supermarket, the Tots Friendly Market store. That was, it was a white supremacist or an ethno-nationalist terrorist attack, wasn't it?
It was.
Left 10 black people dead and 3 other people injured. And that whole great replacement theory is something else that I hear on Fox News, as well as the furious defense of or opposition to gun control. So that little sentence I issued before you came on about the way this particular brand of politics knits these issues together is still pertinent. But imagine, pick a fictional Republican senator, all right? It doesn't have to be one from Texas. you know and I know that their opposition to almost any expansion of gun control is intractable. Why? Just like a simple answer as to why someone who, in their heart of hearts, let's even do it this way, let's go even further. In their heart of hearts, they know that the case for more gun control is absolutely clear. Why can't they vote? Why can't they change?
I think it's two reasons. The first is if you're a Republican senator, a generic Republican senator, who comes out in favor of some strengthened gun control, you are going to be primaried from the right the next time you are up for re-election.
Yeah, and
if you're not
they're well-funded, well-organised. I mean, they know what they're doing. That's a genuine existential threat to your political career.
Exactly. And when that primary comes, if you are a Republican running in a Republican primary in a red state, especially, and you are being portrayed as a soft guy on guns, you're going to take away people's guns, this, that, and the other thing, you are going to lose. And the guy who's primarying you from the right is going to come in. And the only thing that I draw some solace from in those situations is maybe it'll allow a Democrat to do well against a complete nutter from the right.
So I think that's an English word that you've deployed there.
It is. I'm an Anglophile. What can I say?
There you go. A little bit of transatlantic cooperation can go a long way. So I understand now why you cited the whole electoral system and the whole nature of federalism in your opening comments, because it is almost impossible for a Republican senator to do the right thing, even if they know it's the right thing. So finally, how does that play into what Tim Kerr said about 90% of Americans being in favor of some further forms of gun control? How can the nutter be confident, or at least even be plausibly thinking about winning?
Well, because there are exactly 0 elections in the United States that are run countrywide.
Yeah.
Everything is by district or by state. So if you're a senator, you only have to, let's say you're a senator from somewhere like Texas or Wyoming, some Wild West state, right, that is very, very strong on guns. You don't have to worry about someone from the left coming to take your job, because, if you say the right things about the right things, you're going to get reelected no matter what. And that's ultimately the way it is. So if you talk to Americans writ large, 90% of them are for some sort of strengthened gun control in some form. But if you talk to Wyoming people or Texans and you ask those same questions, the result is probably going to be dramatically different.
Sure.
And it depends on the question you ask, obviously. So it's intractable because these things won't change until the culture changes.
Is it better than it was when you were young? I mean, I know we're in a particularly horrible period for gun attacks, for massacres, but is the likelihood of a culture change greater, smaller, or the same as it was when you were half the age you are now?
I think, I don't remember it being this crazy when I was younger. I don't remember the NRA or people who are for gun rights having this much political clout, and this much political clout that is so extreme. But my hope is, this is a country that 20 years ago was so against the idea of same-sex marriage and things like that.
Yes.
And within 20 years, we completely legalized it in all 50 states. So I think culture changes are possible, more possible than perhaps before, and that might be partly because of the internet and things like that, the information age. But, it's got to be a grassroots cultural change that pushes these changes from the bottom. It's never going to come from Washington. It's never going to come from elected officials. It has to come from that 90% of people who want the change.
And that is, almost impossible to envision when the stakes are as you describe them. I'm just trying to bring the media into it, but I don't think it would have been appropriate, because it goes deeper than that. You might be told that Barack Obama is going to come and take your guns away, but the problem is already there before the media starts doing its thing, because your desperation to hold on to your guns is the thing that's been fed by that sort of rhetoric. Alan, thank you. It's a brilliant really, really helpful. Not exactly uplifting, except for that observation towards the end that the direction of traffic is perhaps positive. I can't help then thinking about the huge reverse gear that's just been slammed on for abortion legislation, potentially, according to that Supreme Court leak. But that's a healthy lesson for us all to take from recent events, is that no victory is ever complete. Victories against oppression, totalitarianism, discrimination, victories against appalling practices are always potentially temporary. You never take the pressure off, otherwise the forces of darkness will creep back in again, as we're seeing with abortion legislation potentially in America. David's in Gloucester. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
nice
mate.
to speak to you.
Likewise.
I consider America in denial where it comes to the gun law. In 2007, my wife and I did we hired a car and we drove around Florida.
Yeah.
And on the second night, we arrived in Orlando at a motel very close to Wet n Wild off International Drive. That night, we walked less than half a mile around the corner to an Aberdeen Angus restaurant. And on the way back, there was a car at the exit of a motel, and three guys basically opened a window, and we had a gun pointed at us.
Holy moly.
My wife ran through the bush of the hotel into the car park.
Yeah.
They turned the gun on me. The words was, "Drop your purse."
Yeah.
No, to me, a purse is a purse,
Sure.
but they obviously meant a man's wallet or whatever.
Yeah.
And I actually had the money in a bum bag underneath my shirt, as it was.
Okay.
I did the same. We ran through the bush into the car park of the motel, and they drove off. We spoke to a officer actually who was in the hotel at the time, taking a statement from somebody else, and he came out and his words were, "Would you like to report this?" And my wife said to him, "We've just had a gun pointed in our face, pointed at us."
Yeah.
He said, "Mom, this is America." We did report it. Two patrol cars turned up and interviewed us separately. They were very apologetic for whatever the politics was at the time. They said, "You can thank George W. Bush for this." Whatever the politics was about guns at that time, I don't know. And one more thing, the following morning, we were at breakfast, and in our motel, there was obviously families with children in prams and whatnot.
Yes.
And we'd seen those walk along the same road. And after breakfast, I went to reception and asked to speak to the manager, and he came out of his room at the back. And he said, "I'd just like to report that we'd been held up just yards from your hotel at the front."
Yeah.
"Oh, hush, 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 hush.
No.
Please come into my office." No, please don't go spreading that. Let me give you some advice. Take your car. I said literally half a mile around the corner.
Don't walk anywhere. Don't walk anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not denial, is it, David? It's a kind of it's just a normalization. It's a hyper normalization. It's just that you and I would be so staggered by it, and they're utterly unstaggered. They're not denying that it's happening. They're just denying that they're denying that it doesn't have to be that way, I guess.
Yeah. It's every time we've heard of these incidents since, we've just looked at each other and said, "Well, there you are." It's no surprise to us. I mean, it happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. It happened last weekend, and it's absolutely dreadful, the loss of life. But unfortunately, it's going to happen again.
And it's the price they pay for what, do you think? If we spoke to one of them, what is it you get? Oh, well, the price we pay for X is the frequent mass murders, the frequent massacres, and particularly the school ones. That's the price worth paying for.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if the criminals that held you up are going to be particular opponents of gun control, are they? They're just hoodlums with a gun, and in this country they'd have a knife or similar, and they're criminals. But it's the people who aren't criminals, who are adamant that the access to guns needs to be ever easier and utterly untrammeled, that are just baffling. What a story, David. Crikey. It seems like a stupid question, but you know how my mind works. If I get curious, I have to ask it. Did you enjoy the holiday in any way, shape, or form after that?
We flew into Miami. We were there for 12 days. We flew into Miami. We drove down. We was only in Orlando, thankfully, for 5 days. We didn't do much while we was there after that.
I bet we
went to the Space Coast, which was fantastic, and then we moved out to the Gold Coast. the rest of it. I mean, we'd been there the year before at the Keys, and absolutely beautiful. And I'd love to do that again. My wife won't go again, unfortunately.
I'm on her side. I think I'm on her side on this one. I think it's just I'm late for the news, mate. But I just wanted to know, and I'm glad that you managed to enjoy the holiday. But my goodness me, that is not what you expect, is it, when you're in the land of the theme parks? 12:32 is the time. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:36, Simon Sharma, the brilliant historian, puts it rather well. He says, because of course the fact that the killer immediately bought 2 semi-automatic rifles right after his 18th birthday had nothing to do with the Republican governor and legislator lowering the age at which you could buy deadly weapons to 18. And of course, events in Uvalde this week are just the latest. Just in any other country, you'd think... I know it's a bit of a lazy refrain, something must be done, something would be done. We had one school massacre in this country, in Dunblane, and it was followed by a ban upon handguns. It may have been a quick reaction, as in if they'd taken a little bit longer and done a slightly more complex bit of legislation, I don't know. But you haven't had any massacres since. And you have a massacre in America, and it's the mindset of the politicians that now go, yep, but that's the price you pay for. For what? Might be a stupid question, but if you want to answer it, you're more than welcome to try. 03456060973. 12:37. Jochen is in Truro in Cornwall. Jochen, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello.
I lived in America for several years, and I've been listening carefully to some of your callers. There's some interesting points being made, but there's so many layers to this as far as why the American people have this fascination with guns. And my experience over there was that they have almost a worship for the military class, for this warrior class of the military, which are a very small percentage, and that's reflected in all of the media and advertising and branding over there, as I'm sure is seen from the UK.
In some part, it's always done. You'll know this better than I, because you've lived there. But you can't talk about America in a homogenous form, can you? You can only talk about these pockets. That's what confuses me. It's the pockets where these feelings are held. If Tim Kerr is right, and the population, the proportion of the population that would be comfortable with some further forms of gun control is about 90%, then even if you're right, and I think you are, that the intractability of the politicians, the terror of turning around and saying, actually, I am going to vote to make things a little bit... I'm going to vote to make it a little bit harder to buy for an 18-year-old to buy a semi-automatic rifle. Steve Kerr, sorry, not Tim Kerr. That's the bit I don't get. Do you see what I mean? I think we get dewy-eyed about the military in this country as well. I do myself, but I'd never think that 18-year-old kid there, as a consequence of my support for the armed forces, that 18-year-old kid over there should be able to buy a semi-automatic rifle.
Agreed, James. But at the same time, with the perception, of people living in America, there is real fear. My wife was a school teacher, and we had a small boy. We were broken into in our home at 8 o'clock in the evening by, someone with a gun and his friend. I was robbed at gunpoint while doing charity work in St. Louis.
It's chicken and egg, though, isn't it?
The amount of people around us, neighbours of mine, were shot in their doorway. Another neighbour was shot in their car. Family members have been, victims of mental illness, and firearms have really contributed to their demise. It's the situation around guns in America. Although the conversation now is focused around these, semi-automatic and fully automatic firearms, the good guy with a gun theory that goes on in America, which as soon as this happens, and after every shooting, you see these examples of videos on social media coming out, a good guy with a gun. At the same time, having lived there, a lot of the news articles I was reading of people, I'll be honest with you, like myself, James, after experiences, I carried a gun. I went and got training, and I got a concealed carry license, and I carried a firearm. Because
someone's come into your house and pointed a gun at you. It's...
Well, it wasn't for that. In the house, I was,
Well, even so, you lived in constant
in the home, the gun
risk.
was never loaded for fear with my wife and child.
Of course,
it was something where I was by myself. I wanted to be able to get home to my family.
You didn't buy a semi-automatic rifle?
No, but these handguns out there nowadays, you can very easily adapt them to, I mean, they have 30-round magazines.
Yeah.
So, and they can fire incredibly quickly. You hold your finger down on the trigger and off all those 30 rounds go.
I mean,
it's very similar in a closed environment. So while the good guy with the gun, so many examples I heard of, for example, a lady, I was doing restoration building work over there, and in the local Home Depot car park, a lady shot somebody who was leaving with stolen goods.
Yeah.
Now, she thought that she was doing the right thing. You know, so there's so many of these examples where people lose their lives through, you know, misuse of firearms.
Well, no, it's not, is it? It's through a proliferation of guns, and it's through the ease of access. But just because criminals also use guns doesn't necessarily, well, it certainly isn't an irrefutable justification of non-criminals using guns. The bit that I'd like you to do finally is just fill in that gap on that. The school massacres are a price worth paying for what?
For Americans, it's a price worth paying for their individual right to protect themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that. I mean, it's not your fault. It's probably a silly question. I was looking for something that might surprise me. The individual right to protect ourselves. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work for me, but as you say, Jochen, it clearly works for them. 12:42 is the time. Helen's in Exeter. Helen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Hi, I used to live in Atlanta for 10 years, and my eldest went to elementary school there. And every day when we had to, you know, wait in the carpool line to pick him up, there was a man that lived opposite, and he would take that time to clean his guns.
Right.
At least a couple of times a week. And so he'd have one on his foot, he'd have one on his hip, and then he'd be cleaning all his other ones on a table.
Outside?
Outside his house.
It's just weird, isn't it?
It was so strange. And I thought, it wasn't long after Sandy Hook. And and I said to the policeman when we went to the park after school, I said, you know, is he allowed to do that? Because I think he was doing it on purpose.
Yes, of course he was, to intimidate you.
Yes. And they said, oh, yes, ma'am, you know, that's his right, you know, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, my friend, she noticed it as well. She put it on the, you know, community Facebook page. He used to drive a zombie hunter truck as well, which had a canoe on it, and you know, he was a very strange person. But there was hundreds of comments, but most of those comments, probably there was only about 5 people, you know, who disagreed.
So you can't. I mean, it's like trying to it's like trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon, isn't it? That's the bit that you need to have spent time there to fully understand, I think, because it's easy to sit here and think it is so obviously pant-wettingly awful.
Yeah.
How can they not see that they need to do something about it? There's something so deep-rooted inside them that sees the possibility of being denuded of their own guns or their own access to guns as an enormous affront that we can't begin to understand.
I mean, it's just like tunnel vision. They refuse to even contemplate it, and they don't see the harm in it. And the comments were, well, you'll be grateful when there is a school shooting and he can go in through the roof, you know, and save all our kids.
Has that ever happened?
That was the logic.
It's incredible, isn't it? So it's a false sense of security as well.
My husband says that the NRA obviously, you know, give a lot of money to people like Ted Cruz. You know, so
yes, of course they do. So that, I mean, that's going to be part of it as well. You've got the electoral threat of the candidate to the right of you challenging, and then you've got the existential threat of losing important funding. And, you know, I guess we will do this again one day, and that's why Steve Kerr's comments were so powerful, isn't it? Because it is the utter sense of futility in even having these conversations, because on the other side of the room, on the other side of the chamber, there are people who think it's absolutely fine. Oh, I'm very sad. Thoughts and prayers. But the dead children are the price that are worth paying for my right to have an incredibly powerful weapon in my hands whenever I feel like it. Quick true or false for you. I mentioned Dunblane, the only school massacre that's ever happened in this country. It was a primary school. You're probably aware. If you're not, this is going to stop you in your tracks this morning. That a young Andrew Murray hid in a cupboard. A young Andy Murray hid in a cupboard, I think, while a man called... I won't tell you his name, actually. I'm always... minded not to give these people any form of celebrity, even if it's posthumous, but it left, I think, 16 pupils and 1 teacher dead. True or false? A currently prominent British politician said at the time, after that ban was brought in that I told you about, a currently prominent British politician wrote at the time, "Nanny is confiscating their toys. It is like one of those vast Indian programs of compulsory vasectomy." So after the only school massacre in British history left 16 pupils and 1 teacher dead, and the government responded by banning the sort of handguns that had been used in that massacre, which currently prominent British politician do you think wrote, "Nanny is confiscating their toys. It is like one of those vast Indian programs of compulsory vasectomy"? It is 12:49. I'll reveal which British politician it was, prominent British politician it was, who wrote about the ban on handguns after the only school massacre the United Kingdom has ever suffered. Nanny is confiscating their toys. It is like one of those vast Indian programs of compulsory vasectomy in a few moments. But I just wanted to refer you back to that book, Britannia Unchained, written by Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Elizabeth Truss. Because the famous line I always remind you of is that they wrote, "The British are among the worst idlers in the world." They wrote this about you. "We work among the lowest hours, we retire early, and our productivity is poor. Whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors or businessmen, the British are more interested in football and pop music." And that is, of course, the same Dominic Raab that stayed on the beach during the awful evacuation of Kabul. But there's another line in it. Here it is. "Stop indulging in irrelevant debates about sharing the pie between manufacturing and services, the North and the South, women and men." I quite like it when I stumble across stuff like this. So the book says that the UK should stop indulging in irrelevant debates about sharing the pie between the North and the South, which is the entire levelling up agenda of Boris Johnson's government, featuring as Home Secretary Priti Patel and as Foreign Secretary Elizabeth Truss. As long ago as 2012, they put their names to a book. You also have the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab. Is he Secretary of State for Trade, Kwasi Kwarteng? Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, isn't he? So in Boris Johnson's government, the man who is currently Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the woman who is currently Home Secretary, the man who is currently Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Justice, a man who is he's a minister as well, actually, a Minister of State for University Science, Research and Innovation, and Elizabeth Truss, who's currently Foreign Secretary. 10 years ago, they wrote that the UK should stop indulging in irrelevant debates about sharing the pie between the North and the South. So there you have it. 5 senior members of Boris Johnson's levelling up government on the record 10 years ago, taking the absolute rise out of the very suggestion that we should be trying to level up between the North and the South. It's almost as if they stand for absolutely nothing and will therefore fall for anything. I'm going to play you a little clip, I think, of my full disclosure from this week, if I may, because I absolutely loved it. I've never had a full disclosure guest that I didn't enjoy talking to. Obviously, there are levels of enjoyment. I'd never be indiscreet enough to suggest that the ones that I had enjoyed less than some of the others, but it's generally an absolute joy. This week's was just wonderful for a number of reasons. Most obviously, he's such a lovely man and such a fascinating interviewee, but also I found myself thinking about my childhood a lot. We spoke a lot about his childhood, but he's an actor who it made me think of my late father a lot because of the stuff that we enjoyed watching together that featured Robert Lindsay. So, I mean, GBH was huge when I was a younger man, but there's a sitcom that isn't as well known called Nightingales that featured him and David Threlfall that Dad just adored. And then right back to Citizen Smith in the 1970s. It would have been repeats, I think, that I watched. And then, of course, when I mentioned to colleagues here that I was interviewing Robert Lindsay, a lot of the younger colleagues were excited because of My Family, the sitcom, a hugely popular sitcom that he did for about 11 years. So, and when I said to Mum that I was interviewing Robert Lindsay, she said, "Oh, I saw him in Leaping Ginger at the Royal Exchange in Manchester in about 1977. So every single generation that I mentioned Robert Lindsay to had a sort of personal affection for him and a personal regard for him. And I span at least 5 of those generations, I think, because I also saw him in Beckett with Derek Jacobi, I think at the Haymarket Theatre in London when I was still at university. And it was one of those, I've told you before that I had rather stupid ambitions to be an actor at one point. And there were a couple of things I saw on stage. I saw Mark Rylance as Romeo when I was about 16. I saw Michael Sheen in a play called When She Danced when I was about 20. And I saw Robert Lindsay and Derek Jacobi in Beckett when I was about 24. And they slowly knocked all of the stuffing between them out of my ludicrous thought that I might one day actually be an actor. And this is just a peach of an interview. It's just a really, really lovely interview. And it is this week's Full Disclosure. I haven't heard any signs of ambition yet. I've heard a slight sense of wonder that you got in. I've heard the seeds of a lifelong passion for drama, for theatre, for all of it, for the grease paint and the crowd. But I haven't heard yet any inklings of, certainly no desire to be famous or to be, I don't know, should I have done? Should there have been some ambition? You wanted to be able to earn a living.
It's going to be a therapy session, James, but
it's always a therapy session.
Always absolutely, and it's free. I don't think I've ever been that kind of ambitious.
No, because you're not a shower.
No.
What about?
I can be.
Sure.
I can be. I have been, and my sons now. If I stop acting the goat, they get, oh please, they get a bit embarrassed. But no, I haven't been a show off, and I don't think I don't.
What about competitiveness? What about in the final years at RADA or when you're going and thinking, I want that part, and then you don't get it, or someone else gets it? Or did you always have that ability to find the best in whatever part you got? Or
yeah, I don't think I'm sounding a bit squeaky clean now, but I don't think I've ever had that kind of ambition where I would eat my own grandmother to get it. And, I've been very philosophical about not getting the roles. And I don't know where, because I don't have a theatrical background. I have lots of pals, like Emma Thompson, I've worked with many times, and I love her, and she's a theatrical dynasty.
Yes, of course.
And Emma I used to be so envious of her knowledge, because she was so at one with the profession, and and I used to ask her advice many, many times. Her mum, I knew, Phillida and Eric, her dad, when they were alive. I worked with them in the Royal Exchange in Manchester, and it was always, I just thought, oh, that must be wonderful to have that family background about the business, because it is a cutthroat world. Of course it is,
yeah. But you never felt any compulsion
I would
to
never
cut anyone's
throw anyone under a bus.
Quite rare, that, is it? Do you think? I mean, I'm not asking you to blow smoke up your own bum, but that is quite rare.
I think it is.
At your level.
I've talked about it a lot, and I think it seems to me a lot of actors I know who are what you call at the top.
Sure.
Have to certainly live a life that is not domesticated, that is very isolated, that is very selfish, and I wasn't prepared to live that life.
No. He is such a lovely man. Here's Sheila Fogarty. Oh, we're off now. What's your connection with Robert Lindsay?
It's Wolfie Smith.
Is it? Yeah.
It's Wolfie, Citizen Smith, and GBH.
Which for you as a Liverpudlian, GBH must have been like,
and he
injected into my veins.
Absolutely. He captured the utter madness of those times and of those individuals.
He really did.
He really did, yeah.
I wasn't that familiar with the politics when I watched GBH. I'm more familiar with the politics now, but he is an actor.
The terror.
Absolutely right. Whenever the arm goes in the air like that, there's a moment in the interview where I refer to that, because Wolfie Smith was like this. He tells an amazing story about someone in Manchester shouting from a roof, all right, Wolfie, or power to the people, and throwing his arm, and he fell off the scaffolding, and he came down like in slow motion and landed on the canopy of the. It was fine.
Good.
You have to listen to it to hear the stories. I just loved it. It's such a.
And the woman who played his potential mother-in-law.
Yes.
In it, I can't remember the actress's name. She
was
so sweet.
Peter Vaughan was the father-in-law, wasn't he?
She was so sweet and innocent, wasn't she?
Oh, Wolfie.
But on the money every time.
No, exactly that. And every decade, he's had an absolute humdinger and actively chose after 3 years of Citizen Smith to walk away from celebrity and super fame.
And a handsome devil, if I may say.
He is what I would describe as a beautiful man.
A handsome devil.
You should see his arms, Shield. His arms. He's like he was wearing a T-shirt for it, and I'm sitting there 25 years younger than him, thinking, flipping heck, where did he get guns like that? Anyway,
I love an arm.
Well, we all love an arm. That's Robert Lindsay on Full Disclosure this week. An absolute treat, and he reveals at the end the part. And there are no prizes for guessing. The part he hasn't played yet, but would really, really want to. And I'll tell you what, when he does, I'm going to be in the front row of the Royal Circle. That's it from me for another week. We'll be doing it again on Monday morning from 10. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Here's Sheila.
How was ABBA?
Oh, I forgot to talk about ABBA.
I can't believe you didn't talk about ABBA.
It was so strange. The first 5 minutes, I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing here? By the end, if you'd hypnotised me or given me a truth drug and said, "Did you ever see ABBA live?"
You
I would have said
yes.
yes.
Yeah. By the end of it, you were an avatar.
I was absolutely up for it.
I'm going in July. Can't wait.
I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a wonderful night out. 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 It's a wonderful night out.